All right. So I have instructions to start. So thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you to the Arctic Circle, the Ministry of External Affairs, and the Ministry of Earth Sciences, along with ORF in terms of organizing and bringing the speakers together here. My name is Ramcharan Vijayaraghavan. You can call me Ram in short, from the Polar Educators International. We are a network of international educators, science communicators, scientists, researchers, and indigenous people in over 60 countries. I am honored to have a diverse set of speakers here, ranging experiences. We have Dr. Asik Ravindra here, the former director of NCPOR, with amazing stories to tell. We have Dr. Malti Goel, Chief Executive, Climate Change Research Institute from India. We have Aisha Al-Zuwaidi, Associate Professor from Khalifa University in the UAE. And we have Nicoletta Adimilio, researcher from the Institute of Polar Sciences in Italy. Thank you and welcome to India. Namaste, vanakkam to all of you. So I would like to start off with the topic given to us, and it's quite an interesting one. There's a little bit of backstory to it. President Grimson and I were on the same panel on the International Polar Year at the International Science Council in Oman this year. And there was a huge delegation from the Global South who wanted to be involved in the polar regions as well. And most of them have been strongly impacted by climate change, especially the island nations, right? So one of the topics which came out, not from that specifically, but which has been on the thought of a lot of people, is Bridging Hemispheres, a global Arctic science policy initiative. I'll just read out the brief given to me because we are going to stick to the discussions along that. So one is in terms of the Arctic resources, the extraction and the potential to drive the region's economy, influence the lives of native communities, and impact the delicate Arctic environment. If conducted without environmental sustainability measures, is going to have a great impact. This session explores the possibility of establishing a global Arctic science policy initiative, a collaborative virtual network of scientific research institutions, universities, and think tanks from the global north and south. The network would aim to conduct Arctic science policy studies and facilitate technological innovation aimed at mitigating the damaging environmental impact of anthropogenic activities in the Arctic. Just to give you a couple of examples from the recent past, one of the issues, if I were to look at it, because of COVID and post-pandemic scenarios, there have been reasons why the best scientists and the most intelligent minds have not been able to work together to solve a problem, right? Possibly the best avian flu scientists are not in the Arctic or the Antarctic, but they might be in the tropics, right? So is there a virtual network that will bring the best minds together to solve a problem? Permafrost is an issue, not just in the Arctic or northern Russia or China. It's also a problem in India, in the Himalayas, in Ladakh, in Jammu and Kashmir. So is there a possibility to get them together? So we will start with the first driving question, and I would request Dr. Ravindra to start off with that. The first question is, which economic activities in the Arctic are in need of scientific remediation, and how well are these plugged into international scientific research networks? Over to you, sir.
The topics are very good. The brief introduction you gave is very educative. The fact remains that the Arctic is very rich. The God has been so kind to the Arctic region. In fact, that nearly 20% of the fuel energy, is located in the Arctic, and nearly 30% of the gas resources undiscovered so far are located in the Arctic region. Apart from that, the living and the non-living resources, all of us know that the Arctic abounds in those resources, whether it is the rare earth minerals, it is even the platinum minerals, and associated minerals like noble minerals. All are located and have been found out in the Arctic region. But the problem is that apart from the living and non-living resources, there are energy resources like geothermal resources are there, and all such active resources. If you try to exploit them, exploration of course is there, but if you try to exploit them, it's going to cause a lot of environmental degradation to the pristine Arctic environment. So some sort of environmental control is required, so that the scientific thoughts are given and are imbibed in the process of exploitation. It's not only those fields which I have said you, which I have told you. There are issues of navigation, there are issues of tourism, there are issues of communication. All these things have a lot of scope, but again, all these have a scientific basis, because if you want to increase the communication, the telecommunication, the space communication, it requires a lot of knowledge on the remote sensing techniques, and for that, the scientific inputs have to be there, because the knowledge that we had about 20 years back or 30 years back, there's sea change in all those fields. Even the navigation requires a scientific basis, because new pathways are being opened up, and we don't know how we will be having, how we'll cruise through those areas which do not have the multi-year ice, but they still have the ice. So all these things are opening up new areas, new arenas, and I think new scientific thoughts have to be given to all these areas if we really want to showcase that all these activities, they do require a scientific rethinking.
Dr. Malti, climate change is close to your heart. Your thoughts on it, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I feel really honored to be speaking on this podium. I am a former advisor, Ministry of Science and Technology, and I am now currently looking after Climate Change Research Institute and trying to sensitize the youth about the climate change issues and scientific solutions for it. How can they fight the climate change? And when they grow up, they need to understand all these much better than what we have. We have learnt it only after it has already occurred. But it started in place when we were studying. So we were working, and now for the new generation, it is a real threat in the next few years. So with that in view, I am working with the climate change. I retired from the ministry 15 years ago. Okay. So I am going to talk not about the mineral resources, economic activity, but about something which is different, that is climate change, which is close to my heart. So climate change, how it can become a source of economic activity. I compliment ORF to take this initiative, of course. And coming back to polar region, Arctic and Antarctic have been subject of exploration for many centuries, we all know. And they are providing proxy signatures for carbon dioxide footprints to study the rise in temperature which has taken place in the environment. So that the anthropogenic climate change produces more visible impacts in polar region. We have been seeing that compared to the rest of the earth. So we have to be more cautious about it, and because it affects the cryosphere, it affects the ice structure, it affects the frozen landmass, everything gets affected. And near the poles on many levels. And warming due to greenhouse gas, which are which get emitted because of the thawing of land, get amplified at Arctic because of the number of feedback mechanisms, causing temperature region to be twice or thrice of what it is in the land. So for this context for this is that if you look at the satellite data, you will find that Arctic sea ice is melting almost 3% per decade. It is reducing by 3% per decade, and from 1970 onwards it has decreased by 14%. So which is a huge amount. Is okay? Okay. So what I would like to mention here, and all this ice melting is affecting the coastal regions in the region, and increasing the release of emissions with scientific solution like carbon sequestration. Can it be an economic activity? This is what my theme for today is. Can we think of something like carbon sequestration to be as a theme? So since oceans are vast storehouse of carbon dioxide, we know, so Arctic features, geological features offer the potential for CO2 storage in a big way, and either on subsurface formations, and a science policy is essential to take collaborative measures which are crucial to understand the risk and benefit of large-scale CCS projects, because it's a vast subject and involves a lot of work. And in this context, I am reminded of a Sleipner project, first project in Norway, which was a commercial plant, which came out in decade of 90s, and still is 30 years or so it has been active and has already sequestered almost more than 20 million tons of carbon dioxide. So here policy was instrumental for this, because Norway issued a policy that any emissions of carbon dioxide from the sea-based gas resources will be taxed, carbon tax. So they introduced. And so this project came up, and because that particular place, it was 9% of carbon dioxide. So sequestering it, separating it from the gas being recovered and then sequestering in the ocean itself was the target of this. So there is many such examples now also taken place in other parts of the world. This was to curb the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think Arctic CO2 sequestration hold the promise for mitigating climate change and a potentially stimulating economic activity in the times to come. But it would require careful scientific assessment and management of various aspects of the implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Malti. I think the carbon sequestering was very interesting point there. On a lighter note, as they always say, if you need to do some digging, call the Norwegians. Let's move over to Dr. Aisha Al-Suwaidi from the UAE. Obviously, there's a growing interest in the UAE on the Arctic front as well. Could you let us know your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you very much for having me. This is such an interesting question. And I was just at a geoscience meeting, which is one of the largest geoscience meetings today. It's about 20,000 Earth scientists that attend the European Geoscience Union. And there are actually some talks on carbon sequestration and measures we're taking on carbon sequestration related to crushing up basalt and putting basalt down. And I'm a paleoclimate scientist and I work in deep time. And what's very interesting is that we have a lot of basalt produced in deep time through large igneous province activities such as Deccan here in India. And basalt is being used today as a measure to mitigate and draw down carbon dioxide through weathering and encouraging weathering. So it gets crushed up and put out on the land. And it's thought that increased weathering of basalt draws down CO2. And one of the things that I actually heard on Thursday was actually a lot of the climate models that they're running to actually test this shows that it doesn't work. And that's a very concerning thing when it's a strategy that's being deployed as to draw down CO2. So the CO2 sequestration question and whether that can be done in the Arctic, I think is a very important one. And related to that, I think, is the changing landscape. If we want to increase economic activities, or there are plans to increase economic activities in the Arctic, one of the things we have to think about is that the landscape in the Arctic is changing because of climatic change. So you mentioned permafrost, and we know that the permafrost is melting. I know in Svalbard they have issues with their runway because the airport in Svalbard has become more active recently with increased tourism to the Arctic. And they are having issues because of increased heating of that runway. So there are infrastructure issues. And as we think about increasing economic activities, we actually know very little in the scientific community about how much those landscapes are going to change, how much permafrost is going to melt, how much emissions of methane there'll be from that permafrost. We see wildfire activity increasing in the Arctic. And so as we think about increasing economic activity, that means more infrastructure being built in the Arctic. And when we build that infrastructure, we have to keep in mind that that landscape is not a static landscape. It is a rapidly changing landscape. And so that infrastructure is going to have to be adaptable to that landscape and to that changing climate. We see increased pluvial events, so that's increased heavy rainfall events in the Arctic Circle. And so again, when we're designing infrastructure to support economic activities, we really have to think about how that landscape is evolving. And in terms of the international scientific community and work we're doing, this is not something we're necessarily focused on. And this is something which I think I come from Khalifa University, which is a very strong engineering university, and we bridge a lot of gaps of science and engineering. And I think that's something that we really need to think more about, is how can the scientific research on evolving and changing landscapes associated with climatic change find engineering solutions for this increased economic activity in the Arctic. And the last thing I want to say is that we could think about that economic activity as being negative, but actually it has really significant benefits to those Arctic communities and allowing them to develop their resources and become self-sufficient. And that's something which I think is very critical today for us to think about. And so with that, I'll pass it on.
Obviously, Italy is having a significant input into a lot of the polar activities. You're also organizing the ATCM this year in Milan, and you have an Arctic Circle coming up. But Italy has also been facing the brunt of climate change with respect to floods, the brunt from the Alps, and a sinking Venice. So people see climate change on the ground. And what are your thoughts on in terms of an Arctic policy, and what are the economic activities that you see from your side?
Hello everyone. I'm here also on behalf of my director, Professor Giuliana Panieri, and she not be here. And thank you for your question. Italy is really a small country in the Mediterranean area. So it's the second hotspot of global warming in the world after the Arctic. We are in the Mediterranean, also see the augmentation of temperature and invasive species, and we deal also with floods and problem also in the Alps, also with dry season in the island like Sicily or Sardinia. And I think it's really important to think and starting to connecting the dot between also our scientists and economic development and all the facing new risk in the Arctic driven by this climate change. But as a scientist, I think we think with a precautionary principle. So it's right to move in this movement of new economic development, green transition, but also think about we cannot deal without the knowledge of the indigenous knowledge of the local communities. And for me, I am a scientist. We deal in how climate change affect the dynamics of pollution in the trophic webs, also in Arctic and Antarctica. So for me, the economic activities like maritime shipping, maritime traffic, also the commercial fisheries, but also the deep sea mining. So the new emerging, it's really challenging because all the benthic ecosystem, all these really now poorly understood ecosystem like the deep sea or the benthic ecosystem, and also I would like to think about also the tourism. Also in Arctic, it's really growing. It's really fluorine industries. And we have to deal also with opportunities for us scientists to do the citizen science and also to guide in some sense the tourists, also the tourism, but also the shipping or the company, because we can think together with a sustainable way, and then zero waste management, or no, also think about the all the equipments without so many microplastics in the water. And as a CNR in Italy, we work really strictly in the European research level, so in the EU PolarNet. Also, we are partner in the Interact, so we exchange scientists in all the stations in the Arctic. And for this year is also the new Polarin EU program. So we have added also the Antarctic station to this program. So it's a really nice opportunities to go and see also other station and other part, to think about pan-Arctic views, and also bipolar or tripolar views also. Thank you.
I think that's a few interesting points there. One is obviously as researchers showing caution before you get into something, and I think you mentioned deep sea mining, which I think the US has recently signed certain orders in terms of going ahead with it. There's also geoengineering, which is again a cautionary tale. But Dr. Ravindra, I would like to come to you and for the audience and the benefit of others who are present here, we'll go through 3 questions, which are the driving questions for this topic. And then for the last 15 minutes, we'll have an interaction and question and answers. And feel free to ask your questions at that point in time. Dr. Ravindra, so obviously there is, and as she pointed out, that EU Interact is one platform where all of them have access to resources, and I've worked with Terry Callaghan before. And the second question is, what could be the constitution, vision, and mission of a hypothetical Arctic science research network where India is a player as well? How do you see that part of it shaping up?
I don't know why do you call it hypothetical, because the networking in the science and the research, especially when you talk of the polar regions, be it Arctic or be it Antarctic, it is already existing. To tell you in the detail, there are a couple of fora. For example, there is one which is called as Asian Forum for Polar Sciences, which includes the Asian countries, for example, the China, India, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and even some countries which are not the polar countries like Thailand are there. So we are in fact already existing in a group where we share all our scientific research, and they also come forward, and then we encourage their participation into the affairs of the Arctic, and maybe sometimes even Antarctic, because as you know, in the recent expedition that has gone to Antarctic, the people from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, they had gone. So these are existing, and then there are forums like Nielsen Science Management Committee. There is a fora like Svalbard Integrated Ocean Observation System. These are all centers where the people come forward, and in fact, India is a leading partner in all those fora. So these centers or the constitution or the vision is already existing. The basic framework being that whatever you do in the field of the science, which is your area of expertise. For example, our areas of expertise in the atmospheric sciences, in cryosphere, in microbial research is already well known, and we have done a considerable job in monitoring the Groningen Glacier in the Svalbard area, Nielsen area, and then also some 7 or 8 new species in the the fjord area, where the glacier meltwater comes and joins the fjord water. They have been discovered in that area. So all these networking vision is already existing. The only thing is possibly if you want to create a new network which is independent of these fora, well, it is a very good concept, and all those countries which are taking part in the scientific research in Arctic, they can come forward, and then we can all. It need not be only Indo-Arctic; it can be all the Arctic nations, and including the global North and global South. We can all work together. Why only have a Indo-Arctic? We should have all people together, because science doesn't recognize boundaries. It's all open, so everybody can come together, and we can have a joint sort of a fora where everybody can chip in, give their own expertise, and possibly we can do something good for the Arctic. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's some very valid points made there. Dr. Malti, your thoughts on that?
Well, before I give my view, I just take 1 minute to explain the audience on my left what is carbon sequestration. Is it clear? Okay.
They all know it. Yeah,
They know it. Okay. So then it's okay, because we all know that science of global climate change based on the increasing carbon dioxide emissions, and we need to sequester, we need to remove them from the atmosphere. So either we can store below the earth, or we can put in the plants, increase the forestation, or this, and we can also put it in the sea at different levels, and that is the third option. So that is one point. Now coming to the a suggestion of this hypothetical Indo-Arctic network, it's a good idea. It will be with the aim of fostering collaborative research and understanding Arctic science, including India's role in this region, highlighting India's role in the region. So I think such a network can become a leader center with a mission to conduct research, disseminate knowledge, promote international cooperation, and have focus on climate change. It is going to be vital that way, and it could aim to promote sustainable development in the Arctic region, balancing economic opportunities and environmental protection. In this context, I would like to mention that the India's Arctic policy is addressing the scientific concerns to sustainability, and starting from 2007, India took first expedition to Arctic. That is how many years? 18 years ago, and then India soon in 2008 placed a station there, Himadri. So India has been establishing this present policy of India. It states that India and the Arctic building a partnership for, it says, sustainable development, resting on the 6 pillars, which give a focus to cooperation on Arctic countries in green energy and clean industries. So, at least 4 out of it rests on 6 pillars, and at least 4 of these pillars are related to science. So, science policy will be crucial to understand the risk and benefits of these. If we take the carbon sequestration or carbon capture and storage as the area for economic activity, including the potential impact of it on this. And incidentally, the NCPOR, which India established, recently celebrated, for which I have director here on my left, he 25 years already celebrated. So I also fully agree with the comments which he has made, because India has been very active, and this is really a good initiative. I support it.
Thank you, Dr. Malti. I would like to ask a couple of questions to Nicoletta and Aisha. So one is in terms of you're part of various networks in terms of science and research. So what is the common ground that you see which you think would support, say, a hypothetical, international science research network where all of you are able to contribute and learn from?
The science networks we have, I think, were highlighted earlier, and there's quite a lot of different science networks for the Arctic, focused on the ocean, focused on ecology, and lots of other areas. But in terms of what's kind of missing is the community component. And I think India is very unique, obviously, in that it has a very strong connection to communities in the third pole, which are disproportionately affected by things like breaking of ice dams and glacial melt, and flooding associated with that glacial melt. And those challenges are not necessarily challenges that exist in the Arctic. The challenges in the Arctic for the Arctic communities are really quite different. And so the science isn't necessarily plugged into what the community needs are. Mm-hmm. So those communities are very concerned, one, about the increased economic activity around them, the increase in the number of things like icebreakers in the Arctic, increased in activities which could impact their normal, let's say, native food sources in terms of fisheries and ecology and their landscapes. And so the science that we do sometimes is science of not necessarily wishful thinking, but it's much broader than what those communities need. It's not necessarily answering community-driven questions. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect between what do communities need and what do communities see are their challenges in terms of their natural environments and what's happening in their natural environments, and then the science that we're doing. As I mentioned, I work on deep time climate change, and that has really big repercussions in terms of modern climate change, because we have these periods in deep time where we had very high carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, very, very warm temperatures, no ice at the poles, either pole, and perhaps no glaciers on mountains either. And so studying those intervals is really important for us to understand what could happen in our future without ice at the poles. But the science that I do doesn't necessarily connect very effectively to the public, because that's too far of a distant future for them. And so I think the science networks that we have, maybe we need to listen a bit better to what the communities need and understand what are the challenges that they're seeing. And so I think if you're thinking about building this new, or say, building on the existing networks and creating a new network to think about scientific research challenges in the Arctic, I think the first thing to do is a grassroots front, and to look at what are the community needs and what are the community challenges, and how economic activities are really either positively or negatively going to impact those communities. Deep sea mining is a very good example, because we already saw that deep sea mining started. The Norwegians started some deep sea mining and then immediately was abruptly stopped because the community disagreed with it. The US now is saying they're going to start deep sea mining. Whether that will happen is unknown. They have some challenges there, I think, with that. But the question is, do the Arctic communities see a need for that deep sea mining? And how do they think it's going to impact them? If you're dredging up all this material from the seafloor and you're mining that material, you need more icebreakers, you need more ships, more shipping lanes in the Arctic, and that has other repercussions which aren't necessarily related to the mineral resources. And so I think it's very important as scientists in building these science networks that we keep the citizen science part of it as a key component of that.
Obviously, I am a scientist, and the scientific network, the collaboration, the international collaboration is the foundation of a good science. Also in the Arctic, as a non-Arctic states, we collaborate with the Arctic states. We are part also in many working group in the Arctic Council. I'm part of the AMAP, for example. And I think it's time to make an effort to really connect each other, because we move in really quick forward to the international polar year. So it seems far away, but it's not so far away. And also we can think about the early career scientists, so making some bilateral also maybe programs between Italy and India, maybe. I don't know, with exchange of PhD students. And also we have a possibility in our call for Antarctica and in Arctica also for building this call, this project, the research proposal with another country. So maybe it's another possibility to strengthening this collaboration, because we know we have to find the money for work. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you for mentioning early career researchers. I think one point that we have been discussing as educators is a college student today is going to be an early career researcher in 2032, 33 during the International Polar Year. I think, and one of the pillars of the Arctic policy in India is also capacity building. Right. I think a good network would also establish strong connections between experts and scientists and early career researchers as well. I will quickly go down to the last question, possibly with reduced time, 1 minute for each of the panelists. From all that you've discussed and seen and beyond this forum as well, which economic and environmental interested parties, particularly industries, do you think would support such a scientific network? Because if I'm not wrong, I think budget and financing is something that's extremely critical.
Well, we have a fora which is called as Arctic Economic Council, and it has already identified the 6 or 7 pillars, which includes communication, then navigation, and mining, and all such issues. And I think there are several private entrepreneurs, both in India and elsewhere in the world. For example, a lot of oil companies are interested in trying to explore the resources of the fuel that are in the Arctic region. So all such companies, which include some of the Indian companies like Carin and Reliance, and even ONGC, if I'm naming only the Indian companies, they will be much interested in going, and maybe they already have some, because as I understand, India already has some investment made in the Russian oil sectors. So similarly, in the telecommunication and in the satellite communication, we have got great expertise, and ISRO and NASA, they are together building up a NISAR satellite, which is going to be launched very soon. So that is another field where the Arctic gets benefited directly, and with the involvement of the private parties. So these are two instances. Then we have a lot of mining companies which will come forward, provided they pass the comprehensive environmental evaluation so reports, which are to be okayed by the sovereign countries, because most of the Arctic, as you know, falls under the sovereign control. So if any company wants to get into those areas which are within the sovereign control of those countries, I think their environmental laws have to be followed. If at all you are going to the area which doesn't fall into anybody's specific control, like the capital area under the UNCLOS or in the law of the sea, there are certain areas which fall under the normal universal heritage, which are concentrated very close to the North Pole. So those are the areas possibly where the sovereign controls are not there, and there the laws of the UNCLOS will come into being. So these are some areas where definitely a lot of private entrepreneurs will be interested to come.
Dr. Malti, quickly your thoughts.
I talk not about the minerals, but only about the focus on climate change related activities. So I think the main supporters will be, of course, the government and international environment bodies like UNEP and UN bodies will be the financing, in my opinion. But of course, industries, if they integrate the ESG concept in their working, then like energy, manufacturing, and agriculture, and also the energy means energy efficiency also. So they would be also interested in coming and financing this kind of network, which can facilitate more collaboration and come out with some of the mission to make the life of, say, 4 million communities in that region comfortable. So this is my view. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Malti. Aisha?
I think probably the most important entity that we need to engage with is shipping companies, really, because they stand to benefit the most from increased passage through the Arctic, and so they're probably one of the most critical economic forces in Arctic activity and changing Arctic activity, both because of the increased number of icebreakers. If mining happens, there'll be an increased number of ships for dredging and drilling, as well as for moving that material. So I think they can play a very critical role in this. And they recently, I think, had a levy on CO2 in the shipping industry, which was quite big news and has taken lots of years to negotiate. So I think they're demonstrating their willingness to commit to climate finance and offset their CO2. And so from that perspective, they, I think, are probably one of the most important industries that need to be engaged for this scientific network.
That's quite interesting. I think there's a lot of research going on into nuclear and renewable energy on the shipping side as well. Nicoletta, quickly.
Yeah, really quickly, from my point of view, I think we should engage more the technology and infrastructure to enhance all the sensoristics. They can give us the opportunity to have real-time data, also to improve all the mooring system in the oceanographic also. And as Isha said, to involve in the circular science operations, so the blue economy, also for the fisheries, the shipping. And we need to, as a scientist, we need to enhance and integrate our observation system. So maybe with in situ sensors, they can work all the time. In winter time also, it's really challenging, also in Antarctica or in Arctic also. We need to better benefit of satellite data. I think you know the maps of the sea ice or the maritime traffic. And yes, we need all these interoperable platforms, and we need also, I think Italy is really engaged in this, to have open data and open data sharing and really useful setting of data we can all benefit also. For this we always technology and infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Nicoletta. I think we have quite some inputs on that front, and I think one of the areas as well which is picked up is now on every tourist ship or expedition ship, you have at least a few researchers and scientists getting the platform to actually go conduct their research. So in a way, it's funding them as well. I would like to thank you all and open the floor for questions. And you can address the questions to any of the panelists. And please introduce yourself if you want to, but be quick with your questions because we're running short of time. Thank you.
Yeah. I am Anil Kulkarni from Indian Institute of Science. So the idea that we depend on mining, oil companies, shipping companies to do the scientific research, what kind of issue it will create? Because will it influence the outcome of that scientific research, because these people are funding and they will say, oh, climate change is a wonderful idea because we get the new land for mining, we get the new land for oil exploration, and they might say, let us get rid of Greenland ice sheet so that we have huge land. So how it balance out on these things, because normally we know that people who fund, they influence the scientific outcome. So what is, maybe any one of you can really address this?
We'll fund you. Definitely they'll do it for some return. But the environmental laws and for all these places are so strict that even if you want that the entire ice sheet from the Greenland should go away, none of the country or even Greenland itself would not allow you to do anything which will impact its own ice sheet. And other than that, most of these things, environment, they are also climate related things. So if the climate change and the global warming is taking its own role, its own impact upon the areas, and it gives you the new areas to the country itself. So I think it is only in those fields where the companies will try to get hold on to. They will not try to reach any newer areas. For example, recently the point has come up that the Norway had to stop deep sea mining. The deep sea mining was allowed because even the UNCLOS allows it. But because it is impacting the environment, that it is not okayed by the local people, indigenous people, so the country had to withdraw. So these things are very important. The controls are very important. So even if the funding agency wants it, if it is deteriorating the environment, I think nobody will allow it.
Any other questions?
Just subsequently, no amount of money will buy that oil. But like industry obviously will try to fund so much so that the policy can be prescribed. If you have people like you have in America now, so they don't believe in climate change. So anything can happen, but it's all hypothetical. It's all hypothetical because the majority of the people, they know that well these things are happening, and the countries themselves will not like it. But then anything is possible.
Economic activities we are planning to undertake in the Arctic region. And as sir has mentioned that UNCLOS has permitted for deep sea wade mining, but it is not environmentally sound. So the question is not what is environmentally. If it was not sound, then why it came into the in a convention, such an important convention, United Nations Convention on Law of Sea. And before that we have a treaty like Antarctica Treaty came before the UNCLOS. So it was already prohibited, as mining was already prohibited in Antarctica region. So why not this fragile environment was protected, and there is no specification is mentioned. I have gone through the provisions of UNCLOS. So deep sea bed mining it has been permitted in the UNCLOS itself. So what will happen to that Canadian Arctic archipelago? That has a very complex geography, and once it will be initiated, no one can stop. This is the tendency. Once somebody will initiate, it is going to be, then somebody will be okay. He's this party is doing, so let me do this. Let me do that. Now there is a too difficult question. I wanted to that what is the opinion of this panel? First, this ice theory, because the Inuits were claiming that the waters of running across the Canadian Arctic archipelago are historical, and that is why they have sovereignty over it. So the ice is melting. So whether their claim will also fed or the claim will lapse, another thing. What will happen if the deep sea wade mining will take place in such a complex geographies like Canadian Arctic archipelago? So these are two different two questions.
These two things, the Antarctic Treaty and the UNCLOS, these are two different things. UNCLOS, the jurisdiction of UNCLOS doesn't go beyond 60 degrees south latitude. So the Antarctic Treaty area is protected from the UNCLOS laws. All the claims which the so-called these treaty signing nations are putting on the Antarctic areas are not entertained by UNCLOS. So let us not put UNCLOS and the Antarctic Treaty at the same platform. And then the question that you were raising about why this is not, when this provision was harmful, why it was included. So if you go to the details of the UNCLOS or the law of the sea, there are different segments of the continental shelf. For example, it's the shelf area, then it is the slope area, then it's the gradient, then it's the area, deep sea basin and the area. So the certain parts of this shelf, the continental shelf, it comes within the sovereign control of a nation, if that is called the EEZ, is exclusive economic zone, which extends to the 200 it's slightly longish answer, don't mind. It extends up to 200 nautical miles from the coastline of a country. And if you can prove geologically that your landmass continues beyond 200 nautical miles, you can claim another 150 nautical miles in the deep sea area. So your area extends to 350 nautical miles. So within that area and the rules and the regulations that are given to you, you have your control. So if you feel in your own wisdom that you can mine certain areas, it is your own wish. And if you think you can do it, well, you can do it if your rules permit it. So that's entirely different story.
In the interest of time, I think just wanted to, overshot the time as well. But just to, you can feel free to catch hold of the panelists and the speakers at any point in time and address future questions. But any more questions? We just take one more and yeah.
So I'm Arpit from Shriram College of Commerce, Delhi University. My question to the panel was, given the growing concerning figures from climate change and the new exploration projects which are quite exploitative, how can this global scientific collaboration come up with the environmental controls that Mr. Ravindra was speaking about earlier, and how can this new environmental controls could be more adopted globally, and what can they look like? Yeah.
I think we have to be very careful that climate policies are not made by scientists. Climate policies are made by politicians. And
Scientists.
yeah, so I mean, scientists ultimately would advise that we don't do anything in the Arctic, right? That we stop all economic activity in the Arctic, because we're for example, if we look at icebreakers in the Arctic, the number of icebreakers in the Arctic has more than doubled in the last decade. And that's shocking, because we're losing sea ice and we're breaking sea ice. So we're encouraging sea ice to be open, basically. And we're altering potentially oceanographic parameters in the Arctic. And so, scientifically speaking, from a climatic perspective, we should be ultra conservative and say, well, all of this activity should stop. But that's not reality, right? And so what we can do is we can make suggestions for protection and conservation activity, which is what's happening. And we discussed the case of Norway and the deep sea mining. And that's a very good example of when the public saw that the economic activity had no interest to them. Although it would benefit them financially, the community fought back and said, we can't accept the environmental repercussions of this activity. And so it's not necessarily what the scientists can do, but how the science can inform the communities to speak up and say, well, actually, we don't want this activity to happen because the environmental repercussions of it are so significant. And I think that's what we need more of, really. Yeah.
I think it's a valid point that you make. I think the most important thing is, as she said, I think it's important to listen to the community voices, and science should try to solve problems as quickly as possible. Just to give you an example, by the time you realize that the glacial lakes in Sikkim or Nepal are being formed and there's flooding and people are getting killed, that happens faster than the time this is taken to actually publish a paper or NASA to detect that there's a glacial lake, right? So science is slightly slow on that front to actually answer community problems. So I think in a way, it's a bigger question. And from a policy standpoint, it's important for politicians to take the community voices up front when those policies are formed. And I've been to over 100 countries documenting climate change and spend a lot of time in the Arctic. And it's also about living off the land and the sea. So it's a life for them, right? So it's important to listen to them as well. But on that note, please give them a great hand in terms of dealing with the tough hypothetical questions being put. And thank you all. Feel free to catch up with them.